Hi, mister. How are you? My name is Daniel Flores. I'm going to present you my lesson plan number 11 from my second term report. The topic is future continuous. The first part from a lesson plan was the objectives. The listening objective was incorporate questioning techniques. That's the first part. The speaking objective was it asked about important information. The reading objective was recognizing the difference between direct and indirect speech. Okay? And the writing objective that I had in my lesson plan was form statements in indirect speech. Okay? So this is important. This is important, the objective, the first part. In the next part from my lesson plan was the methodology and the strategies. I I want to mention two strategies from each one. Okay? Two methodologies and two strategies that I used during my lesson plan. The first methodology that I used was flipped classroom, high tech. That means that students do the problem solving exercise in class. That's the key. That's the meaning of that methodology. The second methodology that I used was the high tech to approach to learning. That means that students use many different types of technology to aid students in their classroom learning. Do you know that nowadays it is important? It is very important the use of technology in our classrooms, virtual classrooms. Now, let's talk about the strategies. The first strategy that I used was the competition. This is the most common within classrooms. That means they can useful in motivating some students to learn. They are especially effective in the classroom if they are tied to a collaborative practice. It is very useful, this technique. I used it and it was very successful for me. The second strategy that I used was that student find the rule. The students had to find the rule by their own. So the students are given sets of examples that demonstrate a single rule, like I before E except after C, for example, and I asked them to find and state the rule. This is a strategy that I usually use in my classes. Now let's go to the next part from my lesson plan. Let's talk about the anticipatory set. The activity that I used during during the class was first on the whiteboard of Zoom. We know that nowadays we're using some platforms like Zoom, like Blackboard, etc. In my case, I used whiteboard of Zoom. I wrote a brother and sister, uncle and aunt, seller or purchaser, something like that. And the student had to realize the common relationship between these pairs of words. Okay, brainstorm some things that these pair might argue about. For example, maybe wash the dishes, lend some money, and get work early, sleep in the sunny spot on the floor. But the students have to create short dialogues from one of these situations. Okay? That is the anticipatory set before the explanation. Before. The next part from my lesson plan was the main teaching input. In that part, I'm going to present. In this case, I present students a slide share. I love using slide shares that contains the principal structure in the future continuous. For example, in that slide share contains that the structure like the subject followed by will followed by be and followed by the verb with ing, the verb in ing form, and some usage and the most common time expressions. Then I ask students to practice future continuous by beginning with future continuous worksheet. Okay? After that, once students have become comfortable with future continuous, practice. Practice future continuous sentences as in this lesson plan. As students become more familiar, because we've got to consider that they got to become more familiar with the topic, with future, introduce more complex dialogues to help students take account of very diverse situation in daily life. Okay? In the next part of the class of my lesson plan, it is the modeling. In the modeling, I provide a feedback. It is very important. It's one of the things that I consider very important. Provide the feedback. Why is important? Because it is important to check in with your students as they work and reinforce their positive efforts when they seem stuck. Okay? I remind them what to try. I always do that because at the end of the class, I ask a few reflections, questions like what helped you today when you were stuck at the moment of doing something. Okay, about the topic. It is very important for all students to keep this in their minds. In the next part of my lesson plan, the guided practice, I present on the screen of Zoom session the future continuous worksheet in order to practice with the students. And I let them write in the answers of each exercise on screen. Obviously, with my teacher's guideline. With my guideline. It is important. We cannot leave our students do whatever they want. They need to receive a guideline from us as a teacher. This activity will be more challenging, obviously, if students try to do it by their own. Okay? But some of them, they will need our help. In the next part of my lesson plan, it was an independent practice. In this part, because it is an activity that they have to try to do it by their own. I tell students to look back at their earlier dialogues that they did it at the beginning of the class, so they can remember about some topic. It's like a warm-up activity. Then the link of exercise online I sent by Zoom direct message I sent an exercise, and they had to. After that, the students, after students completing the exercise, they've got to make a screenshot of the results and send them back to me in order to measure the knowledge learned. This is the way that I usually use some kind of exercise, because if they don't send me a proof, an evidence that they have done the exercise, how can I measure what did they learn, or why it is not clear yet? Okay, so that's why I consider that it's important. It is important that they have got to send me back their results by screenshot. Number 9, the assessment. The assessment. I played a game. This game has no materials. So I start by telling students all the cameras and microphones must be on during this part in the Zoom session, because nowadays some students they always turn off their cameras. They always give excuses like it's damaged and something like that. That we've got to consider this. But my students, they knew that this part it is important, and they must be on during this part, their cameras and microphones. Okay, then I start by saying a future continuous question, like what will you be doing at 3 o'clock tomorrow, to a random student, to a random classmate. Okay, so after that, the selected students have to pick another student until everyone participate in the class. A student have got just 10 seconds to answer the question. So they have to think about what are they going to answer. Okay, and the student have fewer mistakes will be the winner. Okay, in the next part, and the last part from my lesson plan, was the closing, review, and follow up. In this part, I ask students to write down one issue they still have with future continuous, because you know that some students they learn in a different way. Okay, but I feel blessed, because I really had a wonderful group, because most of the students understand when I teach some new topic. They are very, very, very intelligent, all of them, and the English level is very, very good. The purpose of this is just to address any lingering question, because you know that they may exist, and to ensure that the students fully understand before proceeding to the next lesson. There is no strong likelihood that multiple students will have the same or similar concerns. Just this would be a good opportunity to allow the students to answer many of the questions for their classmates. So this is my lesson plan number 11. I hope that you liked. Thank you, Mr. Bye.